have to watch my chewing.
Okay. So Melanie, are you gonna start the recording?
I started.
Oh, she started. Okay, so I'll call the meeting to order. This meeting, excuse me, is now in session and is being held by electronic communications using Microsoft Teams due to the COVID-19 pandemic emergency.
Also, before we jump in, I have a meeting with my boss that got scheduled at the half-hour mark, so I'm gonna have to jump off, but y'all can keep going without me.
At 2 o'clock?
Yeah, at 2 o'clock.
Okay, yeah, and I think I have something at 2:15.
Okay.
Just
Well,
get- okay.
maybe we get it wrapped up. So this is a continuation of a meeting on Monday on review on policies. We got through a number of policies on Monday and getting feedback from the board. Only one policy remaining is policy 7.4 discipline. The remainder of all the feedback has already been provided to the various PRT members shepherding those policies through. And we also approved the quarterly review policy schedule, which, just for your information, has been published on the website, and advisory committees have been made aware of that change as of today. So that is complete. So we are just talking about 7.4 discipline and feedback from the board on that. So I will turn it over to the two of you. And Christina, I got your email, by the way.
Okay.
With your feedback.
Christina, you got the shortest time and the most to say, so why don't you go first?
I just sent an email. I just put a bite of food in my mouth. I just sent an annotated version with detailed feedback and suggestions on line edits and things like that. Overall, just a couple of overall comments. This is a really, really great start. I appreciate specifically the clarity in the PIP. It really outlines in a detailed manner what the reactions are for different student behaviors. I put some recommendations in there on how to make it stronger and how to continue to refine. I think that there's a lot that we're doing with restorative justice in here, in addition to the CASEL SEL framework. And so the more that we can just align those two things, whether it's like a set of icons next to each interaction that identifies whether an appropriate response is SEL based or restorative justice based, something like that, that'll just help it be super clear. On the policy front, I echo the comments that came in writing that we want this to be the vehicle where we adopt restorative justice going forward. To Reed's point in earlier conversations, we had never actually voted on it. And so this is the vehicle where we can do that and where we can officially adopt a blended approach of SEL plus restorative justice equals the way we approach sanctions and discipline going forward. But overall, this is a really great start. I think that the community is going to pick it apart, and they're gonna give us some really good feedback on how to make it stronger and make it better and make it more clear. And so I'm looking forward to seeing what the conversation's like in the coming weeks. But going through it with a fine-tooth comb was a really productive exercise for me. And I went through and made a bunch of comments about organization, about layout, about things like that. So I'm happy to continue the conversation offline as I think Jeanette is the one who's spearheading this one. As Jeanette is working on this, if there's anything that doesn't make sense in my comments, just feel free to have her contact me directly and we can have an offline conversation, because it's a lot. I think I put in over 100 comments in that document. So.
Yes, I'm skimming through them right now. They are plentiful, but they look really no, they look great. They look really very informative and useful. So that's great.
Yeah, I have one quick question, Christina, and I'm sorry if I missed it. Change the title of policy to I got it. Okay, perfect. I thought you were just saying change the name. I didn't see the new name, so I apologize about that.
Oh yeah. I totally agree with the idea of this being called the Student Code of Conduct, but there's one point where the name changed back to discipline, so I was flagging that it had changed back to discipline. Matt, for our other conversation on Monday, this one does also need just a structural cleanup. There's like some indentations that don't make sense. So I think that going through it with another fine-tooth comb before we post it for public comment is probably worth it, so that we don't get slammed on unclear formatting, when what we really want people to do is focus on the content and the substance of what the individual responses are.
Yeah. This one has the same issues that the other ones
Yeah.
had. I've caught a numerous, but there are many more that I missed. So okay, we'll do that
for sure. No, and when you look at the track changes, there's so many changes to this policy. I think this policy hadn't been updated in eons. So there's a ton that we just need to do to get up to date with where we are on discipline. And a lot of this is not actually new. It's just documenting processes that are already in place. So right. I'm glad that we're doing it. And also that means that the structural and like formatting edits are going to be many.
Yes, it does. It does. Yeah. And that's just sort of the nature of the beast.
Yeah, totally.
On this sort of a thing. And so sometimes what we end up doing with this is rather than trying to keep track changes directly, what we do is we just take the old original and the new one and we just do a difference. And Word builds the track changes for us. But then you lose the comments, which is the structural issue with that. We'll sort it out.
Y'all can figure it out. Have fun with that one. You'll be fine.
Yeah, and just so you know, Meg Tosillo is actually doing the actual work itself. And so it may be Meg rather than Jeanette reaching out to you for if they need clarity.
Sounds great. Either one of them can totally reach out. Happy to chat.
Okay, thank you very much.
Yeah.
So I don't remember when it was. I think it was Francisco had told us that they're working on a code of conduct. Mm-hmm. Is this what he was talking about? An existing policy that's changed and its title changes to student code of conduct? Or is it something else?
I think there's a broader document. Brian, you can correct me, because we saw a version of a broader document that is intended to be provided to students beginning in the fall. But this is the policy and the PIP that is the foundation for that family-facing document that outlines the student code of conduct for students.
Yep, that's absolutely correct. It's a broader document, Reed, that Jeanette is working on, and she's actually seeking feedback from various groups that we associate with here at the school system, and also I think she's working with I'm not sure if Meg or some other person that the group, some former retired person who's kind of helping to put it together. It's something that's needed to be put together for quite some time. So it's totally separate from this policy, but it should be aligned, I would say, right?
Okay, so this policy will form the authority, the basis for whatever comes forward there from Meg or whomever.
Mm-hmm. That's correct.
I mean, it'll be referencing back, APS policy J, whatever.
That's correct.
Yeah.
Okay. All right. Thanks.
And they're doing them all simultaneously, so the pieces all fit together really nicely.
Yep.
Okay. Thanks.
I do think that means that this summer, once we get very close to finalizing this, we're going to need to make sure that we're appropriately crosswalking the other doc so that they're singing in concert with each other and that we don't end up with any conflicts, which is just going to require some constant revision and reading both of them side by side, but we can do that over the summer.
Yeah, I agree.
Yeah, it's the same same team is working on all of those documents. So they should be pretty good at trying to keep them in line.
Even better. Love it.
Yeah.
All right. So I guess we have your feedback, Christina, through this, and we received a couple other board emails. Is there anything else, Reed, that you had on this policy?
No, I didn't. Thanks.
Okay. So given that really sped up this process for today. that wraps up this policy feedback. So I will forward that on this one. So we got a couple of options here. We've got we can talk about the BPIP concept, Christina, today. Well, I would follow up. Reed, you asked me a question about the implications of, I guess it was Barbara's question, about the implications of having the policies be adopted, this big wave of policies being adopted at the first meeting I think it was in September, or first meeting of the school board after the school year starts, if they have to be in place first. So I forwarded that email on to onto the staff. All right. So I'll let you know what they say.
Okay. Yeah, you remember that there was going to be a bit of a public comment issue, because if we were going to raise the info item at a work session, typically there isn't public comment at a work session.
Right.
And so depending on whether we need it before or at the first meeting of the year is going to inform, how the timing works out.
Right. Right. And so so I haven't got all the feedback yet, just so you
Yeah.
know, the first set of feedback for the instructional policies, it was going to be okay. But the whole discipline policy is I've not heard back on that one yet. The whole section, the whole huge bundle of those things. So I'll let you know, but I'm already hearing back from people on that one. So the other thing, so we're working on the way for the policies. Christina, do you want to talk about the BPIP concept? We want to do that?
Actually, just seeing as we are 24 hours away from voting on the budget, can we talk about the over/under investment and where we are with that?
Brian, that's you.
Okay. So I'm trying to see if I could have this document from, give me one. I wasn't prepared. I didn't have it all the way up. So.
Totally fine. I'm asking you a random question.
Yeah, so let me see here. Have something. Want to make sure I have an electronic. I just rather pull up an electronic version of it and kind of walk through, if I may. So. Okay. All right. See if I can share this. Can you all see that?
Yes.
Okay. And so basically, what John Mikovic did was actually just take a look at, like I said, actual staffing comparisons. I'm going to do my best to explain it, especially because you and I were going to meet again. But if you look, like, of course, it's just like a grid, and you see the greater than projected FY20, less than projected, and as projected. And across the top, you have the staffing increase, staffing decrease, and staffing as projected. The first two I want to kind of point out is that if you look at, going to the last row of each one of those tables as projected, I'm going to go over to staffing decrease. And so what John found out, again, this is, I would say he snorkeled on this. He hasn't scuba dived on it to understand what's really behind the numbers. We would have to take a deeper look at that point. But basically, if you look at Discovery, they were as projected, but they were actually able to work with minus 3.3 FTEs at the school, and they were still able to get it done. And also, you see a similar situation at Kenmore. But also at the same time as I'm talking, there's also a table that John put to the right on that side. But just to kind of just boil down to what stood out to me the most is that you have levels. If you look at the less than projected in both tables, from Barcroft to Tuckahoe, and also at the bottom, Langston and Gunston, at secondary schools. These were schools that had less than projected enrollment, but yet their staffing levels were a little bit higher so they had more staff than they needed in these situations. But again, I have to preface and say this was again, this is he scuba dived. This is on the surface. We're not sure what's really behind the numbers, and would really need to take a deeper look at these things. But this is what he found on his first review using the numbers from last year's staffing. If you look to the left of the table on the chart, it says as a star for each school, FY20 adopted staffing was compared with actual staffing as of November 30th of 2019. And so he was, and again, it's a long way off from 2019, but this is what he was able to produce. And so again, I don't really want to go into those other colors because I want to double back with John, and we haven't had that conversation yet. But I did want to point out the less than projected, but also the as projected, to see schools like Discovery and Kenmore, how they were still able to operate and do well with a decreased staffing. So this is what I have from John Mickelweiss at this point.
This is fascinating because if you add up, that's 28, just in the staffing increase and less than projected, that's 28 FTE roughly.
Mhm.
That's almost $3 million. It's a lot of money. Yeah.
So where is this, first of all, and what's the status today? I mean, are we going to see this
No, this was actually,
tomorrow, or
this was something, and I have to tell you this, is it gets from one of our prior meetings, Reed. I'm a kind of like a budget hound myself. I'm playing a different role here at
Yeah.
APS. There were some concerns that were brought to me early on in the school year when I first took this job from AEA about some staffing at some of the schools. And basically what I did was I guess the guy, Josh Fobe, I think you've talked to Josh about this too.
yeah, no doubt.
Yep. And Josh, and so I did, was being a team player when I first got here. I said, well, let me take a look into this thing. And of course, the Career Center review took most of my time. As soon as the review was over, John Mickelweiss, he said, let me pick this back up because this was something that he was working on prior to the pandemic. And this is just the latest. So it was something that I asked for. It came up in one of our meetings, and I said, I have those numbers, and this is where it is, if that answers your question.
Sort of.
Mhm.
I mean, we've got this big issue,
Yep, I know.
as rolling towards tomorrow's budget vote about projections and therefore, what the appropriate staffing would be and blah, blah, blah. So is this going to see the light of day before tomorrow? So does this have an impact on any recommendation the superintendent's got for this? It wasn't quite clear on whether he's actually going to make a recommendation about this.
Yeah. So again, this has really not seen the light of day at all. And at the same time, I told the superintendent I've worked on this project. At the same time, though, I've ever since last night's, as I call it, debacle from our team. I've been meeting since 8 o'clock this morning, going over everything, and then I still have not shown this to them, but I'm meeting back. I'm having a progress report on where we are to be prepared for tomorrow night. And I just it may see some light of day at that particular point. But this became relevant from one of our meetings on a side project. I just want to kind of take a look at from one of my conversations with Josh Fobe early in the school year.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right. I'm not sure why I use the word debacle. I mean, got information.
Yeah.
We got new information that is factoring into our decision making.
Yeah.
I mean, this came up when we were talking about the staffing policy a couple of months ago, and so that's kind of where this conversation started. I would encourage you to, at a minimum, like, I understand that we have not even scratched the surface of figuring out the why.
Yep.
But the what is already clear. Like the what is pretty clear to me, that we have some schools that are operating with significantly high, with notably higher staff than what they needed, and or what they were projected to need, and like where the actual enrollment actually was. So I think this is really relevant to the conversation, however you want to incorporate it. But I do think this needs to see some, even if it's just a creak of light, but we need to see it in the next 12 to 24 hours, I think.
Okay.
Or at least it needs to be factored into whatever the recommendation is going to be from staff. Like, I think that this is a contributing point.
Absolutely. And what I would like to do again, because this is something that I have not, like I said, I've notified the superintendent of this. But at the same time, I would like to talk to him about it. But I guess the best way, Christina, would be to kind of lace it into the recommendations tomorrow night I would feel more comfortable doing it that way. Yeah.
Okay, so I'm hearing two different things here.
Mhm.
I'm hearing Brian say it's not ready for prime time. It's something that they're working on, and I'm hearing Christina say it needs to be it needs to come forward as a recommendation related to what we're going to do with the budget, 24 hours from now. So I'm confused.
I don't think those are mutually exclusive. I think that the full report and conclusions from them is not ready to see the light of day. But if Brian brings us to the superintendent and that is factored into the recommendation, like that's the kind of level of seeing the light that I think it needs to happen in the next 24 hours before the vote. But we don't need to see all of it because again, we don't know the why yet. We don't know how to fix it. But I do think that that might be a factor in the recommendation for what we do going forward, given where we are with the enrollment numbers.
Yeah, and again, you all, I wanted to have like I said, I was able to really just talk about the pink, the green section. I really want to have a deeper conversation with John Mikovic about it. So, and also at the same time, and forgive my eagerness to always want to satisfy my board members too, at the same time. So, I mean, and it hadn't really seen the light of day. Haven't gone over it, haven't scuba dived with the superintendent at this particular point. It was a side project I've looked into. So, so I'm rehashing the conversation to say, what should we do with this? And we have 12 hours. So I'm looking for advice from you all on this whole thing. I'm not trying to hurt anybody,
Did you see Barbara sent an email?
I saw Barbara's email
an hour ago or something with a, proposed path.
Yeah, I saw that.
So I'm not sure where this document would fit in to that unless there is, something completely different coming from the superintendent, which again, I'm not certain that I heard last night would actually be coming. But we certainly don't want, speaking as one board member, I don't think we want unverified, tentative, information that's still in work to influence, a recommendation. If there's maybe solid certain stuff that can be interlaced, maybe that would work. But I appreciate the fact that it's a side project and it's a project. It's in work.
Yeah, it's again, it's in the many things that I do. Again, when I first got here, and there was a Josh Fogue conversation, but at the same time, I worked in a school district where we had a huge reserve, we had surplus, and it was just my side project to see where we could find some at the time. So I would rather Christina leave it out until I'm able to flesh it out more with John Mikovic and also have a deeper conversation with the superintendent as well. And I just don't want to blindside anybody. And and I was just being forthright with my subcommittee group on a side project I was working on.
No, and I appreciate that, and that's fine if we want to keep it in progress for now until we have a better sense of the why and how we're going to address it.
Yeah.
And thank you for it, allowing us to have the conversation about it, seeing the pressing nature of current events. I am going to have to jump, so y'all can feel free to jump into other topics, but I think that's fine if we want to continue to ruminate on it. I do think that it'll need to see the light of day sooner rather than later, so that we can start factoring that into conversations about where we're going to go for next year. Then
absolutely. I will continue flushing, and we'll take it from there because it is concerning to me as well. So,
I agree. Okay. Go scuba diving, as you have said.
I will.
I will purchase a snorkel for you.
Arco, thank you so much. I appreciate it.
Okay, I'm going to jump because I'm going to jump to my other meeting that I need to jump into on 1 minute. But thanks, y'all, for productive extended meetings.
Perfect.
All
right, thanks, Christina. Brian, my concern is that there may be some glimmerings of, good information or some kind of dimly flashing light about we should go in this direction, but without doing the deep dive and without finishing the project and something, we don't really know. And because we've got this urgency tomorrow, I'm afraid, this dimly flashing arrow, let's go in this direction, would weigh heavily, and then we find out, oh yeah, we took this action, and really when we see the final report, it turns out that,
Absolutely. And Reed, I am so happy that you brought that up. You brought it up when Christina was on the phone as well, because it needs more flushing.
Yeah.
And John is a great guy. He's our internal auditor. So I just, again, rather flesh it out more. So I appreciate you bringing all of that up, and we holding this till we're able to flesh it out more. I really appreciate that.
Yeah.
If I can tie it back to the policy concept, you need to do a root cause analysis
Mhm.
and then determine what are the governance. Are there any governance causes of this?
Yeah.
Right? And what does governance have to do with that? And how does it impact policy, which ties it back to the mission of our group?
Mm-hmm. Exactly. And Reed, if one other point on it, until we're able to flesh it out, I just think that, because this is relevant. The board office, I'm pretty sure you've seen the emails from Kenmore asking for a 0.8 for exemplary projects.
Yeah.
And a couple of months ago, I added a 0.8 to some arts program over there. But you see why, right? Because they have a minus 5.07 FTE, and so no one has ever really looked at that. So,
Yeah.
So just, I want to kind of make it relevant to something we've been seeing in our emails on a.
No, absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely. The way this enrollment quandary slash, how many, what kind of staffing we end up authorizing related to whatever the real enrollment number is going to be, the absence of this thing that you're working on, the absence of it today or tomorrow is not going to be a fatal flaw.
No.
In what action we take tomorrow. There is, I think there's a majority of board. I think it's safe to say there's a majority of board members who believe that the enrollment projections are overstated, which are then going to lead to too many teachers being hired, which we can't, retrench on because they'll already have contracts. So if we cut that back tomorrow, and we cut it back too far, that Lisa's right or more right, and we're wrong, there's always reserves to add to the staffing contingency when we find out at the end of August, oh my God, look at all these kids. We way underestimated. So, there's ways to.
Yeah, and I think this.
This.
Yeah, and I think that's a good point. I've talked to my former projections person. I talked to my former CFO because I wanted to lay out to the group a method that would give the board confidence in the numbers that we have. But the point you just made just now is that if the number is too low, we have reserves left to take care of it. And I don't think my group, again, I've been meeting with them. I met with them from 8 to 9:15 this morning to plot out. I got people working really hard right now on it. But that's a point that I want to share with them when I have a check-in with them at 4:00 this afternoon. So I appreciate you pointing that out. And, I was in another meeting where, we were talking about, the career center thing we're going to do tonight. But, I made Leslie and Lisa stay on because we got Barbara's email, right? And I'm like, guys, this may be a way, to take a look at this whole thing.
Yeah.
So I'll still be talking to the group on this whole thing as well. So, this is, and when I say debacle, maybe it's a strong word. I like winning and making sure that people have a great understanding. So anything less than that, Read, to me is a debacle. So.
Okay, understood.
Yep.
Yeah. I'd like to sort of weigh in from a other of a Baldrige perspective, and they talk about intelligent risks, right? And that concept of risks, and the idea here would be to balance the risks. What are the risks of over projecting versus the risks of under projecting? Right? And I think I mentioned that at the when we had this conversation about the projections the first time. You got to sort of look at that. What's the risk of hiring too many staff versus not hiring enough staff? And which of those is worse for the mission of the organization and what we're trying to accomplish? And I don't have an answer for you, but I think that's how you find comfort, is saying, okay, we've looked at the risks, and this is more mission aligned than this, whatever that answer works out to be.
Yeah, but I think Reed just made a good point about the reserves. I think that's less of a risk.
It is. I'll throw the balance side. What teachers are available to be hired at that point in time?
Right. That's
In a competitive environment,
Not
are
the
you going
best
to get the
ones.
best teachers for the kids?
well,
Right. So there's always a trade-off.
Bottom of the barrel.
yeah, well, that's been gnawing at me too. That if we see way too many kids at the end of August, and then we reach out to the folks on the bench who we didn't hire and nobody else hired in the recruiting season, then yeah, that's a quick label, bottom of the barrel. But it isn't necessarily. It could be people who don't interview well, but would do a great job in the classroom.
Mhm.
You know, so yeah, it's a risk, but we can quantify the risk on the other side,
Yeah.
which is hiring too many staff, giving too many staff contracts now. We have them. We don't need them in September when we see the final number. We can't get rid of them. We can't translate that money back into or their salaries back into reserves or something, as we could the other way around, where we can translate reserve money into, staff salaries if we have to hire them. So that's
I like the less fiscal risk, especially, and to me, again, maybe I'm using too strong of a word, because I think we're fiscally in a crisis right now, and I'd rather have reserve to get those teachers who may have not interviewed well. I'd rather be in a position to add, and I can't wait to share this with the group this afternoon. So I'm glad we had the subcommittee. I mean, it was serendipitous that the subcommittee meeting had a part two to it.
Yeah.
So.
And I hear a lot of board members saying, I don't know where this is going because it's, there's always a possibility of change, and there's always a flurry of activity in the last, 24 to 48 hours before a big vote, like the budget. But I hear I hear a lot of board members saying, if we can get this staffing thing worked out, this enrollment projections and staffing thing, and save money, we can devote that to a more robust compensation package.
Absolutely.
So I know you guys don't care about, getting more money in your paychecks, but I heard there's a couple, 3 other people who do.
Well, what we care about is recruiting and retaining the best staff members.
Yeah.
And if that's a key strategy to do that,
right,
then that's also an important thing to do. So I think everybody wants the best staff, the right number of the best staff. The question is, what's the best way to spend your fiscal money to make that happen? Pay raise to attract more people going now and in the future. How's it all going to play out? What's the best way to end up with the right number of the best quality staffing to support our kids?
Right.
It's a hard question to answer.
Right? Yeah, but Reed, you can knock me out with that. I'd rather have less staffing and have better reserves. I think that's the way to go. Simply because, again, we can do the increases. At the same time, if we need to hire teachers, we may not have to hire a full core of them, and we'll have money to do a little bit of both. It provides wiggle room, a cushion. Right. So, all right, I'm glad.
And we're already looking at a strong possibility of reserves being refilled, when closeout comes around, as well as improving economy, that's going to help us next year.
Yeah. So I'm glad we had to postpone our meeting.
I hope, I'm hoping I'm taking an intelligent risk here. I'm taking a risk. I hope it's intelligent.
Well, it's pretty clear to me. I think I'm a smart guy. I think Matt agrees with it at the same time.
So the definition of intelligent risk is that the risks of not taking an action are worse than the risks of taking an action.
Mm-hmm.
Right. That's by definition of an intelligent risk definition. The action you're talking about is taking this action and reducing your projected enrollment. And so the risks of not doing that, you're saying the risks of doing that are less than the risks of not doing that. And that's considered an intelligent risk. There's a risk both ways, because it's inherently uncertain. But that's what it is.
But Reed's thing does not hurt us, and that risk does not hurt us that bad at all. And also, we can recover from that because we have the reserve. Yeah. Sorry.
No, I think the competitiveness of the staff members competing for staff members. I think that's a genuine risk. I think that's a real risk. I'm not saying it's worse, I'm just saying it's a real
But
risk.
if we get bottom of the barrel and we're doing our new professional development and training, you working on that as well. We can show that up at the same time as well.
All right, there you go. I don't know. I wish I am glad I'm not voting. How about that?
I don't know. You're the gray beard here, Matt.
I have no hair on the top of my head. I'm glad I am not voting. I'm happy to just give you guys some thoughts and advice about.
No, but I've been in a fog since we got off the call at 7 o'clock last night, and this phone call here, this meeting here is providing clarity for me.
So maybe I'm, justifying this to myself, but the staff that we would have to hire late in the summer, if indeed we had to, who, we're calling, they're on the bench, the bottom of the barrel, whatever, is really only a small percentage of our total workforce or total teacher workforce. We've also got all of those, 20-year teachers and, much more experienced teachers who we are inducing to stay with a compensation package that has an extra step at the top of the scale.
Right.
Whereas if you didn't have that, they'd have no place to go. So, I don't like the idea of bottom of the barrel, but if we're retaining the proven experienced people, it's another ball in the air that you have to juggle in this thing.
Yeah, absolutely. And with that tenured staff that we have, I believe in iron sharpens iron, and they'll be around some better teachers and learn something. All right. Thank you all for this conversation because I'm excited. Yeah. I can't wait to have on. This is very helpful to me.
All right. Is there anything else for me, or you guys want to raise anything?
No, nothing else that we would need to take care of. Everything else can wait until the next official meeting.
Yeah. And what I would like to do, Reed, I would like to share the superintendent. We usually have our meeting. We've been so busy today. We usually meet anywhere between 12 and 1 o'clock every day. We didn't get a chance today because we've been working on the budget together. But I would really like to kind of just walk him through this conversation I had with you and Christina today on what I showed you guys first, if that's okay.
Yeah, that's fine. Okay. And again, has this thing seen the light of day?
Not at all.
Seen it?
No one. I mean, no one at all has seen it.
Okay, so how did Christina know about it?
Because as you mentioned, we were having, I think we were talking about the staffing policy a couple of weeks ago. And basically, I was like a little boy because I had this side project. I was like a little kid, and I was like, hey, I got some information on it.
Yeah.
And we said I would bring it back, and then I think it kept getting pushed off and pushed off and pushed off. And so that's how she knew about it. I told you all about it. I told this body about it at the time.
Right, but that's the connection. Is how do our governance processes, our budgeting processes, our policies, the way we do planning factors, are those things leading to the results that Brian saw? So that what structural changes could we make in those policies to prevent that? So that's the breadcrumbs, Read, but we can't. Yeah. Until we get to the root cause about the why, we don't know.
Oh, right? Absolutely.
We just can't do that to your which is exactly what you said.
And I think Reed would provoke me to be like, hey, I got this data because I knew I had it, but then we were talking about policy that could correct it at the time, and that's all. Yeah,
that's right.
Right. No. That's fine. My operating philosophy is always I would rather have it done right than have it done fast.
Yeah.
So, yeah. Okay. I just was confused when I saw the little example that you put up on the screen. Yeah. I don't think I'd seen that before, but clearly it's a much bigger set of interlocking issues than we're talking about here today that, then have to be, as Matt says, investigated as to what its root causes are and, what the remedies are.
Yeah.
So good. I look forward to it.
No problem at all. And I was just trying to be a good, Josh Fold, he pointed this thing out and I like the kid. So, and I'm glad he brought it to me at the same time as well.
Yeah, no, that's good. you know, he's got a lot of experience as a teacher. And
I was tired of hearing someone say, I've been bringing it to you all for years. And so I just couldn't let it go one more year without us look into it. So that's my side.
Yeah, well, I'm glad you did. And I'm glad you got the time to do it. I know you don't have a lot of time, but this has been one of my big areas of despair, that I got a million things coming at me and I don't have time to grab one of them and get to the bottom of it, you know, especially when it takes a lot of time to do that. You know, you never have enough time to get to the bottom of something. So, and on top of that, I was slow coming to the whole compensation, you know, realization, wrapping my brain around all the real compensation issues, as year after year after year, we weren't talking about giving COLAs when we should have, and, you know, that kind of stuff. So, yeah, I'm glad this is going to work out to something that is going to have a beneficial effect on compensation options.
Absolutely. And I think, you know, as Matt pointed out, flesh it out, go back to the staffing policy and put some things in place. And I think that's the best course of action on this whole thing, and not be involved with tomorrow. So,
yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
All right, great.
All right.
That's all I have
here for you.
That's
If you want to reach out.
I appreciate it.
Okay.
All right. Thank you, sir.
Okay. Thank
Take
you.
care, everybody.
All right. Yep. Be well.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye. Melanie, I guess we're done. And so this meeting is adjourned.
Perfect. Thank you.